Welcome to another deep dive. We're really getting into the chimp paradox today. You know we love to give you actionable stuff, and with Dr. Steve Peters' model, there's so much we can actually use in our lives.
Definitely. It's one of those books that just makes sense of those moments when we're like, why did I do that?
Totally. And we don't need to do a whole Chimp 101 since you've already read the book, but I'm really curious to unpack how this model plays out in those everyday situations, where it's like suddenly your chimp's behind the wheel and you're just along for the ride.
Oh, yeah. Like that foot and mouth feeling.
Yeah.
Dr. Peters' example of Amy, the one where she gets cut off in traffic.
Yeah.
So relatable.
Oh, that instant rage is like we've all been there. What I find so fascinating is that Dr. Peters breaks down how it goes from 0 to 60 in a split second.
It's almost like our chimp can't even comprehend that the other driver might just be running late or didn't even see us. It's primal, pure survival mode.
Right, like that driver is a threat to our existence. It's not just annoying. And that's what's so cool about this model. Dr. Peters isn't just saying, don't get emotional. He's giving us a framework to understand why we react the way we do.
Yeah.
Especially when it seems totally irrational later.
It's like he's shining a light on this hidden world inside our minds.
Yeah.
And once we see it, those automatic thought patterns, we can actually start to intervene.
Absolutely. So let's dive into those thought patterns a bit more. In the book, Dr. Peters talks about how differently the chimp thinks versus the human. But how can we tell who's really in control, especially when things get heated?
Well, the chimp, it's not thinking about logic. It doesn't care about facts. It's all about immediate danger or reward, totally black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But the human, it tries to look at things objectively, get all the information, think about the bigger picture.
It's like the worst case scenario generator versus that calm, reasonable friend trying to talk us down.
Right.
Imagine a coworker says something that kind of rubs you the wrong way. Your chimp might immediately assume they're trying to undermine you.
Right. And then it spirals from there. But the human might pause and say, hold on, maybe there's another explanation. Maybe they're just stressed or having a bad day. The human actually tries to understand.
And that's where the magic happens. It's not that we can shut off the chimp completely, but we can learn to recognize when it's about to hijack the situation. So how do we actually do that? Stop that instant reaction.
Yeah, how do we stop the chimp from
hijacking?
Taking over and making us
say or do things we regret.
Yeah, especially when it feels like it happens so fast, right?
Exactly.
Like that emotional wave.
Just like, bam, and then you're like, wait, what just happened?
Right, and that's where the really practical part of Dr. Peters' book comes in, I think.
Yes.
With all those techniques.
Okay, so he actually gives us tools.
Yeah, he gives us tools.
Instead of just being like, figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. And one, I think it's maybe just the visual of it, the distraction banana.
Okay, yeah, the distraction banana.
Like when I first read that, I was like, what?
I know, I chuckled.
But it's so clever.
It is, it's so clever.
Because it's like, instead of, trying to fight the chimp head on.
Right, which never works.
You're
just giving it something else to focus on.
Exactly. Distracted. Yeah, it's like that old saying, you can't stop a wave, but you can learn to surf.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So Dr. Peters, he gives this example of, like those mornings when your alarm goes off.
Oh, yeah.
And your chimp is like, 5 more minutes. Just hit snooze.
5 more minutes.
Yeah. And instead of getting into this whole argument with yourself, you have this pre-planned sequence of actions.
It's like a recipe.
It is, yeah.
Hey, chimp, here we go. We're throwing off the cover. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Feet on the floor.
You're up. You're moving, and suddenly...
It's like you've outsmarted your own brain.
Exactly.
I love that.
And then it's like, the world seems a little bit brighter.
Okay, and that actually leads us to another one of the tools, the techniques, that I think ties into this so well. It's the reward banana.
Ah, yes.
Which, again...
Positive reinforcement.
I love it because it's like, who doesn't respond to a little positive reinforcement?
Exactly.
Even our chimps.
Exactly.
And those days when, you have a million things to do and your to-do list is a mile long and your chimp is just like, Netflix sounds amazing right now.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah.
And Dr. Peters talks about, actually negotiating with your chimp.
Which sounds crazy.
It does sound crazy, but it's like, okay, chimp, if we can power through these next few emails or, these next few tasks, whatever it is, then we get to, whatever it is that your reward would be.
Yeah, treat yourself.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It actually works.
It does.
But because you're tapping into that, primal need for, ooh, I get a prize.
Instant gratification.
Yes.
But you're also, keeping your human on track.
You're empowering that human.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like this win-win, right?
It's total win-win.
And it speaks to that thing that, Dr. Peters really emphasizes, which is you can't just ignore the chimp. You can't just pretend it's not there.
You can try.
You can try. Yeah, I mean, I think especially for those of us who, like to think of ourselves as very logical, reasonable people.
Right. We're like, I've got this, but...
Yeah, I'm going to be completely rational all the time. But, like Dr. Peters points out, it backfires.
Oh, it totally backfires.
And remember, he compares the chimp to a child.
Oh, yeah.
And it needs attention.
Yeah.
It needs validation. And sometimes it just needs, like, a hug.
Oh, it's true. Okay, that's interesting because I think that leads us into another, I guess, layer of this whole model that I find so fascinating. And it's the gremlins.
Ah, yes.
Those pesky gremlins.
Those pesky gremlins. They're like the unwelcome guests that just never leave.
They overstay their welcome.
They're always in the background.
Always lurking.
Whispering doubts and fears.
And they always seem to show up at the worst possible times.
Always, always.
Like when you really need them to just be quiet.
Yes. Okay, so for our listeners who maybe haven't gotten to that part of the book yet, remind us, what are gremlins? Like, how does Dr. Peters describe them?
Okay, so gremlins, they're basically these like negative thought patterns, right?
And they live in our computer. So that part of our brain where we store all of our beliefs.
Okay, got it.
About ourselves and the world.
So it's like those tapes that are constantly playing in the background.
Exactly, yeah. And what's so powerful about this whole concept of gremlins is that, like, it gives us a way to identify and then actually address these, like, self-sabotaging thoughts.
It's like, wait a minute, that's not necessarily true. That's just my gremlin talking.
Yeah, exactly.
So good.
It's like calling them out,
Calling them out.
You're like, excuse me, I see what you're doing there, gremlin.
You're not going to get away with that today.
Yeah, exactly. And then Dr. Peters, like, takes it a step further and gives us this tool to actually combat these gremlins, which is the autopilots.
Okay, autopilots. Tell me more about the autopilots, because is it just like, are those just positive affirmations that we should be saying to ourselves instead?
It's more than just positive thinking, though, right? It's really about, it's about consciously replacing those, like, limiting beliefs that the gremlins are whispering to us with empowering ones.
Okay.
So it's like, instead of, I'm not good enough, which, hello, gremlin.
Classic gremlin move.
Right. It's like, I am capable and I am worthy.
Yes.
So it's about rewriting that script that's been playing in our minds, potentially for years.
So we're like literally upgrading the software of our brains.
Of our minds, exactly. But as with any upgrade, it takes effort and it takes consistency.
Right. You can't just like install the new software and expect it to, like magically.
Yeah, exactly. You got to actually use it.
You got to do the work.
You have to do the work. Yeah. We can't expect those gremlins to just disappear overnight.
They linger.
They linger. Yeah.
But it's that consistent practice, right, that eventually starts to shift things.
Exactly. And what I think is so remarkable about this model is that it doesn't just stop with, like, our own individual psychology, right?
Right.
Dr. Peters, he applies the Chimp Paradox to our relationships as well.
Oh, yeah, that's where things get really juicy.
It does. It gets very interesting.
Because it's like, okay, I'm starting to maybe get a handle on my own chimp, but now I'm dealing with everyone else.
Everyone else's chimps, exactly. Oh. And they're gremlins and they're...
It's a jumble out there.
It's a jungle out there.
And that's where he introduces the concept of mindsets.
Yes.
Which are these, like, core beliefs that we hold.
About ourselves, about others, about the world.
About the world, yeah.
And those mindsets, like whether we're conscious of them or not, they really impact how we interact with other people.
It's true. It's like this underlying operating system that we're not even aware of most of the time.
Exactly, yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about some of these mindsets, because I think this is where, again, people are going to have a lot of those, like, aha moments.
I agree. And, like, one that that Dr. Peters talks about is the Snow White mindset.
Okay, the Snow White mindset, yeah.
Which is that tendency to kind of see oneself as a perpetual victim.
Okay.
So always blaming external circumstances or other people for their unhappiness.
Right. And like, not to say that we can't have empathy and understanding, right?
Of course.
But what Dr. Peters points out is that when this becomes like a dominant mindset, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. And it just creates this cycle of negativity and blame that can be really tough to break free from.
It's hard to get out of that spiral.
Yeah. And then on the other end of the spectrum, he talks about the alpha wolf mindset.
The alpha wolf.
The alpha wolf, yeah.
Which is interesting, right? Because you think about
Driven, ambitious.
in charge.
Yeah, take charge. Always striving for that control.
Dominance,
yeah. And while that might lead to, success in certain areas of life,
right.
it can also create a lot of conflict and distance in relationships.
Yeah, because it's hard to really connect with someone when you're always trying to be the one calling the shots.
Exactly, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like that power struggle is always there.
Yeah.
And what I think is so insightful about understanding these mindsets, both in ourselves and in other people, is that it allows us to approach those interactions with so much more compassion and self-awareness.
Totally. It's like you're seeing things through a whole new lens.
Yeah.
And maybe instead of getting triggered or defensive or taking things personally.
Right, because you realize, okay, this might be their chimp talking.
Yes.
Or this is their mindset at play.
It's not necessarily about me.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, where we can start to really shift those dynamics.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not about excusing bad behavior.
Right.
But it's about creating that space for understanding.
And
hopefully more constructive communication.
It's funny. We can talk about chimps and gremlins all day, but then Dr. Peters throws this whole psychological universe at us. At first, I was like, okay, is this getting a little too out there?
I know. It sounds very Star Trek at first, but then when you actually dive into it, it's like, oh, this is just a really cool way of understanding how all these parts of ourselves connect.
Right. It's not like literal planets, right?
Yeah.
It's more like these different areas of our lives with their own little
like ecosystems.
Ecosystems, yeah.
Exactly.
So you've got your planet of happiness.
Yep.
You've got your planet of success, security.
And they all kind of
connected.
Influence each other, yeah.
Right. So if my planet of security is a mess.
Yeah.
Because my gremlins are running wild with all my anxiety.
Oh, right. Good luck trying to build a happy life.
Right, exactly.
On that foundation.
Okay, so let's zoom in on one of these planets because I know you were so excited to talk about the planet of happiness.
Yes.
What was it about that chapter that really clicked for you?
Okay, so for me, it was how Dr. Peters reframes happiness, right?
Okay.
It's not just something that happens to us.
Right, we're just waiting.
Yeah, it's not like winning the lottery.
Right.
It's something that we can actually cultivate, which I love because he gives us actual steps to take.
Tools, I love.
Tools, exactly. So it's not just choose happiness.
Think happy thoughts.
Right, which easier said than done.
Right, exactly.
But he actually breaks it down.
Okay, what are some of those practical takeaways from that chapter that you think would be helpful?
One that I really loved is this idea of adding extras to our lives. And it doesn't have to be anything big,
Right,
it's just those little things.
So my 20-minute dance party to Taylor Swift every afternoon.
Yes.
Totally counts.
It totally counts.
As long as it makes you happy.
Yeah, because it's about honoring those needs.
Totally.
Right? For your chimp, maybe it is that dance party. Or maybe it's I don't know, something silly, like watching a funny video.
Yeah.
And then for your human, maybe it's finally I get to sit down and read this book for an hour on Sunday.
Yes, it's that balance, right?
It's totally about balance.
Of letting the chimp have its fun, but also those things that really feel fulfilling to that human part of us.
Yeah, and that's where I think Dr. Peters' emphasis on both, having and being, comes in.
Yes.
Because, the having, the achievements, the possessions, all that stuff, that's great.
It's fun.
It's fun, but it doesn't necessarily equal happiness.
Right.
It's the being, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's cultivating those qualities, the gratitude, the compassion, the presence. That's where that true fulfillment comes from.
It's who we are
Yeah.
as opposed to just what we have or do.
Exactly.
That's so powerful.
It is really powerful. And one of the, I think, simplest but most profound things that he talks about in that chapter is what he calls the happiness approach.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read that, I was like, okay, is this a motivational poster? What is
I know, right?
the happiness approach? What does that actually look like in real life?
So in practice, it's really about making that conscious choice to focus on the positive, even when things are tough, right?
So not ignoring the negative.
No, not at all. It's not about pretending everything's perfect.
Right.
It's just about training our minds to look for those silver linings, those little things to be grateful for, even in the midst of challenges.
And that takes practice.
Oh, for sure.
Like any muscle, you got to work it.
It's so easy to get caught up in the negativity bias, especially with our chimps, right? They're always scanning for those threats.
Always.
But the more we practice that happiness approach, the more it becomes like our default setting.
Our new normal.
Exactly, yeah.
I love that. And listener, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, think about...
What are some small ways that you can start to really cultivate that happiness approach in your own life?
Maybe it's starting a gratitude journal. Maybe it's just like taking 5 minutes every morning to just be present, and appreciate the little things.
It all makes a difference.
It does.
It really does.
Because it shifts our perspective.
Yeah.
And then that impacts everything,
Totally.
It changes how we interact with our chimps, how we manage those gremlins.
Even just how we perceive other people's actions.
Yes.
It's like this ripple effect.
It really is.
This has been amazing.
So fun.
I feel like we could talk about this for 5 more hours.
Oh, easily.
But we'll spare everyone.
Yeah, we'll spare you.
Listener, we hope that this has sparked some new insights for you and maybe even inspired you to go back and revisit some of those highlighted passages in the book with fresh eyes.
And remember, this journey of understanding our inner world.
Yeah.
It's ongoing.
Like a process.
It's a process, exactly.
There's no finish line.
No. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate those small victories and never underestimate the power of a well-placed distraction banana.
Love it. Until next time, everyone.
Bye.
Keep exploring those inner landscapes, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.